Building a digital practice. So we all know the kind of theme, fit for BIM. And when I was starting to think about what do I say to young professionals, experienced professionals, people adjacent to the industry, how do you actually explain to them what to do? And the best I could come up with is actually to tell a story, kind of my journey, call it the origin tales of Machiel. To give you some insights on how I've transitioned from the profession to more tech savvy, call it a BIM manager or BIM lead or technical manager in this case. And kind of maybe out of that, you guys could get some insights into how you can make the transformation and why it's important to make these transitions. I'm also going to change some of your stuff. So, looks slightly warped. Look at this kind of picture. Now, imagine it's you, sitting behind a computer. You've got 4 screens. If you're that lucky, stay there for a lot longer. But imagine all the work you have to do, all the projects you've got running, all the tasks sitting on your desk, all the communications flooding from various platforms to you. And all the while, you're trying to do your job, trying to produce drawings, trying to produce models to actually just get the job done. It's a challenge. Now, think about all the challenges that comes with that. You got tight deadlines. You got a lot of information flow, collaboration with other consultants, coordination issues you need to resolve. It feels like a never-ending task. And the biggest challenge is you're struggling with the software, the technology. It's a frustrating portion. That was me. That was my situation. I was really kind of just caught up in this whole constraint of how do I do my job better, more efficiently with the technology. I started looking and asking for questions like, what do I need to do different? And I started looking at the kind of more example of a traditional architectural path, kind of where do you go from after you studied and things like that. And the reality was, this path didn't solve my problem, didn't give me a solution on how do I make my work more efficient. So I had to ask the question, what else? Is there something different? What can I do that's different, that is new, that's, well, exciting, or whatever the case might be, that'll just change the way how I look at using technology to do architecture. Poor guy's head got cut off now. So I want to take kind of another stab at this imagined situation, right? So sit there, think again about your daily activities, your day-to-day job. Now think about that situation where you've got a problem with the technology, a piece of software, with Revit, whatever the case might be. But look at it different. Immerse yourself in trying to solve that problem through your professional skills of problem solving, your creative analytical skills, your use of focus to kind of just deep dive and trying to resolve the technical problems, and kind of everything else melts away. That is kind of what started changing in the way I started looking at how I do things. You become this kind of specialist in how you use the technologies, the tools that you do use in your daily activities. You become that go-to guy. At the end of the day, you created something new. You created a new passion almost in yourself to solve problems through technology. And this kind of started off with the pillars of BIM, which I've added in information as becoming a critical cornerstone of this process. And Richard did nicely explain kind of the 3 major pillars, which is tech, the technology, processes, as in kind of how we do things, the people you work with, your collaborators, your stakeholders, your colleagues, whatever the case might be, information, the information we need to do our jobs, the information we want to produce more often of. But these 4 pillars is mostly associated with anything digital transformation or digital adoption. So in our world, we need to put a lens of BIM over it. We need to start looking at BIM as being this foundational piece to how we look at technology in our space, in our industries. And my journey ended up something like this. I do go up further, if you didn't know, but I started with the practical side of things. I started with technology. That was my problem, my frustration. I was lacking the capabilities to design, to do my work in architecture with the tools I had. That was my starting point. Everyone else's points might start somewhere else. And through this method of exploring technology, figuring out how to do things, I started transitioning into processes, kind of learning more about the different types of processes we have, from best practices to ISO 19650, BIM methodologies, you self-developed ones, company-specific ones, and processes just grew and grew, almost like a whole different complicated process happening. And that's why mapping it out actually quite helps significantly. And the more you start working on technology and dealing with processes, you start engaging more and more with people, conveying information, showing them how to do stuff, kind of what's happening here today. And that's when I started getting more involved with the people side of these 4 pillars. I was able to communicate kind of new concepts, ideas, processes that link to technology. And there was new collaboration that happened in that space. And from there, I started navigating towards information, kind of the digital age we live in, where information is like a fundamental piece of what we do. And this is currently where I am now. I'm looking at how do you produce information? How do you filter it? How do you clean it? How do you make it useful for the future you, the future people, the stakeholders of the process, of the building? But this is not just a linear path or a wonky path up a mountain or canyon. It's a circular process. So you always come back into your process and you start refining what you're learning more and more. You dive deeper and deeper. I was making a joke the other day, and it's kind of true, that I've reached this point where I want to read the ISO documents from a research study point of view. How boring is that for an architect? But that's kind of what the refinement process comes to. It's kind of taking a deeper look at the next stage as the next piece and kind of trying to build a better future for yourself. Now, everyone will start their journey in this kind of 4 pillars in different locations, from your background, from your need, from your struggles. So there's no clear answer on how to do this or where to start. But ultimately what happens is you start building up a future BIM for yourself, a future framework where you can make the transition to build a new practice, a digital practice with BIM-based projects, where you're kind of augmenting your staff to become digital natives, to kind of look at the world in a different way. And this kind of new world is a merger between the physical and digital. It's completely different to the worlds we know before. That's why we call it digital leads, digital practices, BIM environment. It's all about information technology and the merger of these things. But you do need the people very much involved and engaged in that process. Otherwise, we could have just given it to AI and have exploding worlds. But generally the question is why? Why should I care? Why should I change? Why should I do something different? And sometimes it's just people are afraid of the change, the rapidness of change that's happening. Sometimes just unsure of what to do next. The biggest change that needs to happen is a mental change, a shift in how you see the world, a shift in how you operate. It becomes a cultural change when you start looking at how you share this information with other people and kind of collaborating with that process. And through this, it becomes a digital reframe of how we look at it. Our technical skills delves deeper into software and technologies and kind of different ways of how we can use it in our fields of expertise. We create a whole different environment of how we design and build our projects to make sure that we do create a better future. Our cultural change becomes significant, where it's not just in isolation, but it must be a collaborative approach. It becomes a reframe of culture in the built environment. And then some of you guys might sit here and it's like, yeah, what does this guy know? He's a consultant to consultants, right? He doesn't know the frustrations of what's happening in our projects. He doesn't know the frustrations we have with our deadlines or the problems we have. He's kind of sitting on the side looking in and laughing at us. And yeah, that might be true. I might be laughing a little bit. But the big difference is through this process, this reanalysis of how I wanted to solve my problems, I got a new perspective of how the built environment should look or could look and could fit together. This different approach, this new approach, you do need that consultant on the side to look at it from a point of view that's outside the norm, outside your field of vision. And that's been the key cornerstone of how I've started being able more so to influence the kind of industry in the way I could. And through that is, I started realizing that there's so much more to our industries. It's not just the traditional paths anymore. There's such a wider rule sets or sets of places you can go to. My journey, my path, looks completely different to these. But my path put me on a new direction that got me so involved in tech that I annoy my wife with it. And this is the kind of future you do live with, that you do really need to look at where do you want to go. Yes, you can still become a traditional architect, you can still become a design architect, a project architect, but you also have options. If you are more skilled in technology, embrace it, lean on it, push it further to grow in a new direction. Now, to give you a few key takeaways, to kind of just make it practical a little bit. The first thing is to keep to the fundamental rule of learning, continuous learning. At the scale of which information is made available, at the scale of tech coming out, you cannot pause almost for a minute, because you might just lose out on something that might add a lot of value. Now, I'm not saying go learn everything, but I'm saying go look at what you need and focus in those areas. But also look slightly wider, especially if you're trying to get into the industry or kind of make a career shift, because those wider sets of skills you might learn could create a new career path in the future. It could create something that's completely different. BIM managers 20 years ago didn't exist as kind of like a job. It was like just this arbitrary thing. Today, it's a fundamental point. It's a resource needed across the industry. I can tell you a bunch of companies out there are struggling to find people that can fulfill that role. The second one is to innovate. Be creative. Get involved in the messy creativeness of testings and playing with software, with innovation. There's no clear rule of how to innovate. It's just finding something, see how it works, see how it fits in your world, and kind of use it. If you look at it as R&D, as like a startup does, fail fast and start quick over again. Never wait, and maybe one failure or maybe one item comes through and brings a whole different fruition to your industry. The last one is to collaborate, to create communities, BIM communities, that will actually, where you can share your knowledge, where the younger digital native people, kids, I want to feel like saying, you guys are so entrenched in technology that you don't even know what it feels like not to have a phone. Right, Richard? Drawing tables. You guys have more energy to explore software, to find creative solutions, to find creative ways of using tech in different ways. I was speaking to an old student, alumni yesterday, and he was saying he was doing a little guest lecture at a university, and the students was using Canva, right? In my days, there was no Canva. You had to spend hours photoshopping the crap out of that picture so the tree just looks slightly right. But so does technology change, and it speeds up our life. And we need to collaborate that. And for young guys, share that technology with the more senior, experienced people. The experienced people will, and professionals should share their knowledge of how the built industries are put together, how buildings are put together, structures, so that those two worlds can collide. That communications around those 2 points becomes a critical portion of how we collaborate in the future. This is the only way how we're going to rise the BIM tide. And this is why we are BIM-arumbing. We're pulling together. One more thing. I studied architecture. I practiced architecture. I got my professional registration number. I've implemented technologies, I've implemented BIM. I've influenced more projects in processes than I would have done if I just stick to a traditional route. I'm part of the digital reframe of how to use technologies. I'm part of the digital cultures, or the reframe of cultures in our digital world. the one thing I can tell you, if we don't start looking now at how we look at technology differently, we will not get to a new level of the built environment. Thank you guys for the stage and for listening to me. And then for that, I give you guys the right to go make an impact.